Most people think booking a cruise is simple. Pick a nice ship, find a great itinerary, and your vacation is set. But if you get it wrong, you won't just waste money. You can ruin the entire trip. Some of the most commonly booked cruises are the ones passengers regret the most. We're talking about paying a premium to beta test a brand new ship, chaotic weekend sailings, and bucket list trips that feel more like travel days than vacations. You might even board and find parts of the ship closed for private events. The problem is, these issues only become obvious after you've already spent thousands. So today, I'll walk you through 10 cruises you should think twice about, and what to book instead for the calm, premium experience you actually want. Number 1. Maiden Voyages. The biggest financial trap in cruising is based on a simple, outdated assumption that booking a brand new ship means you're getting a flawless, premium experience. Cruise lines heavily market new vessels, from Royal Caribbean's megaships to ultra-luxury launches like Explorer Journeys. You see the pristine renderings, the high prices, and it feels like you're buying the most exclusive vacation at sea. But that's not always what you're getting. In reality, you're often paying for the most hyped version of a ship, not the most polished one. When these ships first enter service, the crew is still finding its rhythm. They're learning a brand new floating city in real time, and that can mean slower service, inconsistent dining, and an experience that doesn't feel as seamless as expected. Even the food and entertainment can feel uneven early on, as menus, service flow, and onboard programs are still being refined. And that's assuming your cruise even sails as planned. Booking an inaugural voyage comes with real risk. There have been cases, like Cunard's Queen Anne, where delays at the shipyard led to cancellations and disrupted travel plans. And here's something many travelers don't realize. Even on major launches, ships often run preview cruises before the official maiden voyage. So that first-ever experience isn't always as exclusive as it sounds. This isn't just an issue with new cruise lines, it can happen even on established brands launching new ships. Now, to be fair, some inaugural sailings go beautifully. You may get special events and the excitement of being among the first on board, but you're still paying a premium for something that may not be fully dialed in. The insider move? Wait a few months, let operations smooth out, then book the same ship, often for less, with a much better overall experience. Number 2. Short weekend cruises. For decades, the standard advice was to book a taster cruise. The idea was simple. Take a cheap 3- or 4-day weekend getaway, often to the Bahamas on a megaship like Royal Caribbean or Carnival, to see if you actually like the cruise line before committing to a longer trip. But here's the reality. That 72-hour bargain can be a trap. The atmosphere on a 3-day cruise is genuinely very different. You step on board expecting a relaxed experience, maybe a quiet dinner, some live music, or a more refined evening. Instead, what you often find is a much higher energy crowd. These short sailings are cheaper, easier to book, and don't require time off work, so they naturally attract more groups, celebrations, and weekend travelers. That means more bachelor and bachelorette parties, more large family groups, and a louder, more social environment overall. That doesn't make it bad, but it does make it very different. Because of that shift in crowd and pacing, the entire experience can feel different. Dining can feel more rushed, public spaces more crowded, and the overall atmosphere less relaxed than what you'd typically find on a longer itinerary. Even on premium lines, a short sailing can feel like a different version of the product. In many cases, cruise lines also don't run their full program on these sailings. Guest lectures, enrichment activities, and some evening offerings may be reduced or missing altogether. The passenger mix is also very different from what you'll find on longer cruises, which further changes the feel of the ship. So you're not really getting a true sample. You're getting a compressed, high-energy version of it. The smarter move? If you're trying to evaluate a cruise line, choose a 6 to 8 day itinerary for a much more accurate experience. Number 3. Peak summer sailings. Many travelers assume that if they book a reputable, traditional line like Princess during peak summer months, they are guaranteed a sophisticated, relaxing experience. That's not always the case. In major cruise regions like the Caribbean, Mediterranean, and Alaska, peak times, such as school holidays and major vacation periods, are not only the most expensive time to cruise, but also the busiest. Ships are typically sailing at full capacity during these periods, with many cabins holding 3 or 4 people, usually families. That naturally makes the venues in the ship feel far more crowded and frantic than at other times of the year, and that can completely change the onboard experience. Even on cruise lines known for being more couples-focused or adult-leaning, a peak season sailing can feel very different. A late June Alaska cruise, for example, can feel surprisingly family-heavy, with busy public spaces and venues that are far more crowded than many travelers expect. That calm, refined atmosphere people associate with these lines can be much harder to find during peak season. Now, that doesn't make the cruise bad, but it does mean it may not match the experience you had in mind, especially at the highest prices of the year. Although it may be more limiting depending on work schedules or family commitments, the smarter move is to avoid peak season and look at shoulder periods instead. Prices tend to be lower, ships feel less crowded, and the experience is far more relaxed, both on board and in port. And if traveling during peak summer is unavoidable, another option is to choose an adults-only line, like Viking, where the onboard environment remains quieter and more consistent. Number 4. Winter Northeast cruises. Cruise lines heavily market the convenience of drive-to embarkation ports. If you live in the Northeast or Eastern Canada, skipping the airport and driving to New York, New Jersey, or Baltimore for a winter Caribbean escape sounds incredibly appealing. You save on flights, you avoid airport stress, but here is what they don't show you in the brochure. When you book a January or February departure out of the Northeast, often 7 to 12-day sailings heading to the Bahamas or Caribbean, you are sailing straight into cold, often uncomfortable conditions at the start of your cruise. What catches many travelers off guard is just how cold those first and last days can be. For the first 1 to 2 days of your trip, and again on the return, you will likely spend most of your time indoors. The outer decks are freezing, often too cold or windy to fully enjoy, and in some cases, even winter weather or light snow can impact embarkation day. You are essentially giving up a meaningful portion of your cruise experience just waiting to reach warm weather. Now, that doesn't make these cruises bad. Once you reach the Caribbean, you do get the warm weather experience people are looking for. But the trade-offs don't stop there. The winter Atlantic coast is known for being more unpredictable, and these routes can experience rougher seas than tropical sailings. Some sailings are smooth, but others can be noticeably uncomfortable, especially early in the journey. Furthermore, if you think driving to smaller and less popular ports like Baltimore, Jacksonville, or even Philadelphia is a clever way to save a few dollars, be warned. The cruise lines often deploy older, smaller ships in these ports due to route and size limitations. Not necessarily bad, but usually with fewer features and amenities than the newest ships. If your goal is a warm weather escape from day one, it's often worth flying south and starting your cruise in the sun. Number 5. Late season Alaska. Let's talk about Alaska. For most travelers, an Alaskan cruise is the premium once-in-a-lifetime trip. Cruise lines often push heavily discounted fares for late September itineraries. It looks like an absolute steal. You might think you are outsmarting the system by snagging a late-season deal. But here is the insider truth. That discount often reflects a different and more limited version of the experience. By late September, many seasonal operations begin to wind down, and some excursions and tours become more limited or stop running altogether. You will step off the ship hoping to explore, only to find fewer options available than earlier in the season, and some shops and local businesses beginning to close or reduce hours. And then there is the weather. The late season brings colder, wetter, and far more unpredictable conditions. Many travelers report more rain, fog, and reduced visibility than they expected, which can impact those bucket list experiences you've been dreaming about for years. The helicopter flights over the glaciers, the dog sledding. These excursions can be canceled or modified due to weather conditions, and the overall experience can feel very different from what you see in peak season promotions. You spent thousands of dollars, traveled all the way to Alaska, and now you may find yourself dealing with limited visibility and fewer available experiences instead of the full Alaska you imagined. Do not let a late season discount ruin a trip you've waited decades to take. If Alaska is a bucket list trip for you, focus on earlier season sailings if you want the full experience, not just the lowest price. Number 6. Partial ship charters. This is one of the least talked about realities in cruising. You book a premium sailing, maybe on a Princess, a Celebrity, or even an ultra-luxury line like Regent. You pay full retail price, expecting a sophisticated, relaxing environment. You board the ship, eager to unwind in that beautiful observation lounge or book a table at the specialty steakhouse. Instead, you are greeted by a velvet rope and a sign that says, "Closed for a private event." What many travelers don't realize is that large groups, corporate events, themed cruises, or private organizations can book a significant number of cabins on a sailing. This is known as a partial charter. Suddenly, the experience on board can feel very different. The ship may not have its usual atmosphere, and some lounges, restaurants, or pool areas may be reserved at certain times for private events you are not part of. It doesn't mean your cruise is ruined, but it can mean limited access to certain spaces, more crowded venues, and a shift in the onboard vibe. And here's the key issue. This isn't always clearly disclosed during the booking process. So how do you protect yourself? Before booking, take the exact name of the ship and your specific sailing dates and put them into a simple Google search. Look for mentions of themed cruises, large group events, or full or partial charters. You can also check sites like themecruisefinder.com, which often list these group sailings. You can also ask a travel agent or the cruise line directly if any large groups are booked. A partial charter might not matter to some travelers, but for others, it can completely change the experience they thought they were paying for. Number 7. Short port days. When you book a cruise, you naturally focus on destination names, Alaska, the Panama Canal, Central America, and picture a full day of exploring. But the most important detail isn't the destination. It's how much time you actually have there. You may only realize this after booking, when it's too late to change it, and regret how little time you have in port. Some itineraries include short port days, early arrivals, late arrivals, or early departures, and if you're not paying attention, they can completely change your experience. Imagine a bucket list Alaskan cruise on a ship like the Norwegian Bliss. You arrive in Ketchikan, but your schedule says 6 a.m. to 1 p.m. After breakfast and disembarkation, you may only have a few usable hours, limiting excursions and turning the day into a rush. Late arrivals can be just as limiting. Arriving in the afternoon may mean missing key tours or having very little time before things close. And it's not just the hours, it's the logistics. Ports like Puerto Quetzal in Guatemala are about a 2-hour drive from the main attractions. Combine that with an early departure, and much of your day is spent in transit. On some itineraries, multiple ports may be short stops, limiting what you can realistically see across the entire trip. In many cases, people end up staying near the cruise port instead of reaching the main attractions. Even on longer itineraries like Panama Canal cruises, some ports may only be short morning stops. Worse are ports requiring tender boats, followed by long or crowded walks to the terminal. if mobility, stamina, or protecting your peace of mind is a priority. These can be far more demanding than they appear. Do not just look at the map, look at the clock. Prioritize longer port days with easier access to key attractions. Number 8. Pre- and post-refit sailings. This is one of the least talked about realities of cruise ship operations. Every few years, these massive vessels must go into dry dock for major refurbishments. You might see a deeply discounted fare for the final sailing right before a ship gets updated and think you are outsmarting the system. You are actually booking a sailing where the ship may already be showing signs of wear ahead of its scheduled refit. Here is what can happen on those final sailings. Because the ship is about to be updated, some non-essential maintenance may be deferred until dry dock. You may notice worn carpets, older cabin furniture, or areas that feel more tired than expected, with some spaces clearly in need of refresh. Ships home-ported in places like Galveston or Port Canaveral can feel more heavily used toward the end of a deployment cycle. And while the crew continues normal operations, the overall experience may feel less polished than at other times. So if the last sailings before a refit feel worn, the first sailing after must be perfect, right? Not necessarily. When you board a ship fresh out of the shipyard, some upgrades or new features may not yet be fully operational, and there can be minor technical or operational issues as the ship returns to service. You may find some venues not fully open, systems still being fine-tuned, or in some cases, limited areas not yet fully completed. Occasionally, there may even be signs of recent refurbishment, such as minor work or lingering odors in certain areas. This doesn't mean your cruise will be bad, but it may not be as seamless as you expect from a newly refurbished ship. Do not roll the dice on a cruise line's refurbishment schedule. Instead, give the ship time to settle before booking, especially around a major refit. Number 9. Storm season cruises. Many travelers assume that if a cruise line is actively selling a sailing for a specific time of year, it must be a safe, ideal time to go. That's not always the case. Booking a highly discounted fall Caribbean fare during peak hurricane season or an Asian itinerary during typhoon season is a trade-off between price and predictability. If a major storm approaches, the cruise line will rarely cancel your sailing. Instead, strict maritime weather protocols kick in, and the captain will steer the ship away from the storm. You stay safe, but your itinerary can change significantly. You may experience rougher seas, extra sea days, or find that your planned ports of call are skipped or replaced entirely. The dream itinerary you carefully picked can end up looking very different once you're on board. Some cruises go exactly as planned, but others can be far more affected depending on the weather that week. In fact, 2 identical sailings just weeks apart can have completely different outcomes, and in most cases, you will not receive compensation for those itinerary changes. Let's say you book a relaxing springtime escape to Bermuda out of the Northeast. You pack for warm weather, swimsuits, sunscreen, light evenings. But if an unpredictable storm system rolls in, the ship may be forced to reroute. On some Bermuda sailings, ships have been diverted to Canada and New England instead. You may find yourself packed for warm weather but suddenly visiting much colder destinations on a completely different cruise than the one you planned. Never assume that availability equals good timing. During storm-prone seasons, you're not just booking a destination, you're booking a flexible itinerary. If that flexibility doesn't appeal to you, look outside peak storm months when routes are far more predictable. Number 10. Long-distance ports. You see the glossy brochures highlighting these incredible historic stops. Explore Paris. Discover Rome. Experience Florence. It looks like the perfect, effortless way to check off your bucket list without dragging your luggage between hotels. You book the ticket immediately. But here is the reality many travelers don't fully appreciate. Massive ocean ships do not dock anywhere near these iconic cities. If your itinerary says Rome, you are docking in Civitavecchia. To see Paris, you are docking in Le Havre. Florence means Livorno, and those are not nearby. To actually reach these destinations, you are often looking at 1.5 to 3 hours of travel each way, sometimes more depending on traffic. Out of a 10-hour port day, you can spend 4 to 6 hours in transit. That leaves you with a limited, often rushed window to explore. For many travelers, especially those looking for a more relaxed experience, it can feel physically demanding and surprisingly exhausting. And if you choose to go independently instead of on a ship excursion, there's always the added pressure of making it back on time. Now, this doesn't make these itineraries bad, but it does mean the experience is very different from what many people expect when they see those destination names. So before you book, check the actual port location and travel time, because sometimes what looks like a day in Rome or Paris is really a long travel day with only a short visit at the end. So now you know the specific traps and how to avoid each one. But if you want a single shortcut, a simple formula that helps you avoid most of these problems altogether, here it is. Stop playing the cruise line's game. The key is a simple Goldilocks approach. Pair a mid-sized premium ship on lines like Celebrity or Holland America with the shoulder seasons, late April to early May or early December. This combination naturally avoids the biggest issues in cruising. You skip the peak season crowds, you avoid the party atmosphere on short sailings, and you're far less likely to deal with the pricing spikes and unpredictable conditions we talked about earlier. At the same time, you're not overpaying for ultra luxury. You're getting a refined, quieter experience at a more reasonable price. It's not perfect every time, but this approach gives you a much better chance of getting the kind of cruise most people think they're booking in the first place. So, I want to hear from you. Which of these cruise traps have you actually experienced, and which cruise line was it? Let me know in the comments. Your experience might help someone else avoid the same mistake. And if you want to avoid these kinds of problems completely, keep watching. There are more videos on this channel breaking down exactly how to plan a smarter, smoother cruise.